Good evening. So it's taken me a while, but I finally finished reading The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I actually started this book before I read Witch King, but I got kind of bored of it and took a break from it before coming back. The main character, Addie, is cursed. Like, she was born in, I think it was 1700s France. Only she is essentially immortal because of a deal that she made with, I guess, what I would consider a dark spirit some time ago. It's been 300 years since then, and even though she is immortal, part of her curse stipulates that everyone she meets forgets her, like the moment they no longer see her. It makes it pretty much impossible to actually live any kind of normal life, since, for instance, she can rent a hotel room and then get kicked out the moment the proprietor looks away because they forget that she's paid, like they forget that she's a guest there, forget that they've met her, forget that they've taken money from her, and it causes her to, well, always be making first impressions, and then, it creates a lot of awkwardness and makes it pretty much impossible for her to actually stay anywhere or build, I guess, any kind of life. And she's spent the better part of 300 years since she made her deal trying to figure out, like, how to live this way, since I guess preoccupies her, like, is it really living if you aren't really able to leave any kind of mark behind? Like, you're not really able to affect the world or other people in any kind of lasting way. So she keeps trying to find ways around her curse so that she can create something. Like, she also used to be an artist, but she can no longer, because you can't affect the world, is like anything she tries to write will unwrite itself. Like anything she tries to draw, the markings will disappear like within moments, so that she can't actually leave any kind of impression upon the world as she's passing through it. However, it's now the early 2000s and she meets a person called Henry who works at a small bookstore, and for some reason that she doesn't understand, Henry is able to remember her. This book oscillates between Addie's past and present. So you partly have the narrative of how she became cursed and the early years, like how she learned to live with it, the things she learns to do in order to cope with her circumstances. Then you have the current day where she's trying to understand why Henry is like the exception to the rule, and she's also taking the opportunity to try to experience a part of life that she's really, really longed for but hasn't had the chance to experience until now. So let's see, I guess something good. It is a very well written story. Like, the author does a good job of taking like all these bits and pieces of snapshots from her very long life and pulling it together into a coherent picture of like Addie's own transformation, of like how she begins and how she kind of finds ways around the curse and what it tries to do. Like, 'cause essentially the person who gave her this curse doesn't want her to want to keep surviving, so it's her way of like finding a way to keep living. Like, how does she continue her existence, I guess, with the limitations that she has? And it does kind of go full circle, and it's a very complete kind of story. But unfortunately, I had to admit that I did not enjoy reading it very much. Like, the language is very poetic, but I think language like that is pretty in small doses, but it gets kind of tiring for me when you have to read an entire book on it. And there's not much humor, I guess, and too much grimness. Like, the tone for me just always feels a little bit gloomy. Like, I guess when you are always making first impression, there's always this awkwardness. It's like a series of little tragedies every day with every person that she encounters. And if you've listened to any of my previous reviews, like, I'm not really big on tragedy. And if I already know that her life is going to be a series of little tragedies, I don't really have a huge interest in hearing more about it, since you can pretty much predict how it's going to go. I mean, like, anyone that she tries to create a relationship with, no matter how much she likes them, like, will forget her like the day after. And it doesn't really matter how many different kinds of beginnings you have, it all ends up feeling like the same story over and over again, and I don't particularly enjoy reading it. So even though it was a really well done story, like it was kind of hard for me to get through.